Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the best and worst recordings of Ravel's La Valse. Ooh, what a great piece La Valse is. You know, the problem with isolating La Valses is that it's only 12 and a bit minutes long, usually, or a little less, a little more. Sometimes, unfortunately, quite a bit more. But it gets attached to other things because it's short. And as a result of that, there's a billion recordings of it, and it's hard to hear it in isolation. But it really deserves to be because it's 12 minutes of absolutely nightmarish, expressionist, apocalyptic horror. I mean, that's what happens. What is it? It's a waltz, a beautiful, sensual, just flirting, mysterious, half-lit, twilight waltz that bursts into glorious view a couple minutes in and then proceeds to go progressively insane until finally, at the very end, it just rips itself to pieces. Now, Ravel insisted that the work had nothing to do with his recent experience of World War I and, Europe dancing on the edge of, of oblivion and all of that stuff. It was supposed to be a Viennese ball in the 1860s or something. That's what he said. Who cares what he said? What the piece does is represent Europe dancing on the edge of a precipice and falling over. I mean, that's what it is. It's the music speaks for itself, and what anyone else says about it is kind of irrelevant because it's so directly obvious what's going on there, and the best performances realize that with a take no prisoners directness. The thing about Ravel's music, of course, is that it's so incredibly well written and precisely written, and you just gotta do what he tells you to do. Most people have a problem with that. You'd be amazed, especially at the very end when, all hell breaks loose and you've got tam-tam smashing and trumpets smearing and it's all just whooping it up. There has to be a sense of control always. There always is with Ravel. No matter how crazy he gets, he's being crazy with great precision. And that precision has to be there. But on the other hand, you have to give this sense of everything bursting at the seams and the whole thing just coming to its cataclysmic conclusion. A lot of performances do that. In this particular pile that I have a dozen different conductors and 13 different recordings. There have been some truly horrible recordings of La Valse, and it's really a tough piece to ruin, actually, because let's put it this way. It's not a good piece if you try to micromanage it, which means, get fussy over too many details, because Ravel did all the fussing for you. It's pre-fussed, so you don't have to do it yourself. And it's also not good if you try and show everyone how wonderful you are at like Viennese rubato and, the give and take of the Strauss waltz. And Ravel also did that. It's written right in there. But the worst performances are the ones that are either underpowered, particularly at the end, but there also are all these eruptions along the way that throw the waltz out of kilter. And they've got to be shocking. It's got to be sudden and startling. And if it isn't startling, then what's the point? And then there are just nutty people who do nutty things. One of whom is the famous Sergiu Celibidache, who has released, remember, he didn't make recordings, which is why there are several recordings of La Valse with him, floating about. Oh gosh, it's awful. His approach was to basically snooze away at the beginning and then wake up really, really fast, really suddenly at the end and dart forward as if it's going to make any difference at that point. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. So if you see a Celibidache recording of La Valse and you're full of the legendary wonderfulness of his incredibly slow things, he did do a good bolero at an incredibly slow tempo, but that's a different work. Remember, it's a hypnotic work. La Valse is not hypnotic. La Valse is supposed to be slap you in the face type thing, you know? So forget his La Valse. Just forget it. Run away. Go away. Don't deal with it. The other one, the recent one, most recent bad La Valse was Klaus Mekele, which I reviewed here on this channel. You could take a look coupled with the Symphonie Fantastique. The coupling makes a little sense because both are sort of hallucinatory, at least the symphony in its finale and here, and La Valse throughout. They're these hallucinatory things that go nuts at the very end. But he never goes nuts. That's the problem. It's a soft-edged, sloppy, uninteresting performance that, doesn't surprise me given what he's done so far. I wonder, La Valse is another one of those pieces. It's liable to fall victim to its own polish and finish and expertise. Today's orchestras are so good. I mean, they can play just about anything. And La Valse is a difficult work. It really is. It's for a huge orchestra. It's a lot of complicated things going on in it, and orchestras can toss it off. But what you really need is an interpreter who's willing to bring that extra something that makes the whole piece come alive, rather than just be played accurately with technical finish. And that's a big issue. It's a big issue today because people can do it and they'll do it with great polish and it'll be okay. And if you're at a subscription concert, you'll sit there and you'll probably enjoy it. But if you recorded it, oh, no. So anyway, here we go. You ready to go through this stuff? I mean, I've been blabbing for 6 minutes already, which is plenty. And some of you will post a comment saying, just go 6 minutes in and ignore all the bullshit at the beginning. So, I'll delete the comment, but, anyway. Here we are. Enserme. It's in this box. This is one of the old Enserme boxes, but there was a coupling of La Valse that had Honegger's Pacific 231 and The Sorcerer's Apprentice and all these other French things. It was a wonderful record. The whole record was wonderful. Enserme is, a guy of great precision in terms of his interpretive approach. And he had a second-rate orchestra in the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande. But on that disc, first of all, that was one of their later discs, and they were in much better shape than they were in the 50s. And it's from the 60s. And second of all, they really play. He really has them playing, and he really understands the piece. And so it builds cumulatively to a very exciting finish. It's really well done. So Enserme is a classic. Get rid of this enormous thing here. I just had to show you something. So there's Enserme. Then a recent one that was extremely good and very powerful was on Ondine with Robert Trevino and the Basque National Orchestra. They did 2 Ravel discs. Most of his orchestral music is very, very well done. They're beautiful. It's a very fine orchestra. The sonics were terrific. And Trevino understands how the music's supposed to go, and he's not afraid of making a big climax at the end. Yay! That's rare, but it's exciting when it happens. So Trevino on Ondine is, if you want a modern performance and modern sound and all that, yeah, it's a very, very good option. It really is. Another classic, real classic, was Charles Munch with the Boston Symphony. Munch was famous for his 2 recordings of Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe. I actually found his boleros and other Ravel stuff to be kind of not all that fabulous sometimes. But La Valse is a Munch piece, as was the Symphonie Fantastique. Klaus Mekele, take note. You should get out your stereo, your eye bloopy things and ear critters and stick them in there and listen to how the music's supposed to go before you try and do it again. Seriously. Boston Symphony, of course, was the great orchestra in the French repertoire. It's much better than any of the French orchestras at the same time in the 1960s. And boy, do they play it beautifully. They really, really do. I mean, they just have the sound. It's that lean, transparent sound, but with really big, major power at the climaxes. And, a piece that goes completely ape at the end is exactly what Munch sort of did best. He would just sort of let it all hang out. And yes, it's a let it all hang out kind of piece. Not a let it all hang out conductor at all, but someone who did an amazingly fabulous La Valse was Bernard Heitink with the Concertgebouw Orchestra of Amsterdam. His Ravel generally was beautiful. His emphasis was on the precision and beauty of the orchestral writing. It is a gorgeous performance. The playing is exceptional, but he doesn't hold back. Particularly at the end, he just doesn't hold back. And that's the key. You know, I keep saying this, but it really, really is. It has that tension that I mentioned between accuracy of execution and it's like a rubber band that's ready to snap. And it doesn't snap until the very last bar, but it snaps. That's the point. The sound was also beautiful. These are some of the better Philips recordings made in Amsterdam. These Ravel recordings, they're really, really lovely. There's also a fabulous Rhapsody Espagnole, a Bolero, Le Tombeau de Couperin, which is incredible. Really, really, really beautiful performances. Not to be missed. They were also released on a Philips twofer with more stuff than we have on this mid-priced issue. And of course, these are in the big Heitink Concertgebouw box, naturally. He remade all of this stuff, by the way, with the Boston Symphony. Not as good. Not nearly as good. It was very, very disappointing. It wasn't that great sonically, and it wasn't that good performance-wise either. Heitink was hot and cold. That's all I can tell you. Another wonderful performance, actually, that is easy to overlook because it's hard to find now, particularly, was Eduardo Mata with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. Mata did a really beautiful Ravel orchestral music series, with the exception of the Daphnis and Chloe, which was an early digital recording that was just dreadfully recorded. The sonics got all messed up. But he was a master at that Mediterranean, French, Spanish repertoire. I mean, he did it with total confidence and conviction, and his La Valse was really strong. These are all good performances. I mean, there's a Mother Goose, Rhapsody Espagnole, Bolero, Alborada, Del Gracioso, the whole shebangy. You know, it's the usual Ravel, conglomeration. The Mother Goose isn't on this disc. But, boy, they are idiomatic and strong and colorful performances with no hang-ups at all. Really, really good stuff. And Mata was a fine conductor. He died in a plane crash. Why do conductors like to fly planes? I mean, some of them fly planes, some of them fly on planes. Sometimes the plane they're flying on crashes. Sometimes they crash the plane they're flying. Either way, it was terribly sad. He was with his partner, who was a lovely woman, and they were flying back to Mexico, and he crashed, and that was it. A terrible, terrible loss. Anyway, next, Abato. Now, Abato, of course, is the micromanager par excellence, depending on the repertoire. But his Ravel with the London Symphony dates from the period of his best recordings. He really did wonderful, wonderful work when I say Boston, the London Symphony. The London Symphony is the one I meant. I don't remember what I said. I was thinking here because he also worked with the Boston Symphony. He did a beautiful Daphnis and Chloe Suite No. 2, which is on this disc. This is a collection of his Ravel stuff without the complete Daphnis, which was with the London Symphony. And La Valse is excellent. It's as was Bolero and all the other stuff he did of Ravel when he was in London. He had an orchestra, first of all, that, unlike Berlin and Vienna, didn't need to be pushed to do it right. I mean, the London Symphony Orchestra played this stuff under Monteux. They understood. I don't know how many were left then, but the same personnel. But they understood how the music was supposed to go. They were not afraid to be glitzy and colorful, and for the percussion to play out. And Abato let him do it. He was not groping for minutia in the inner voices or any of that nonsense. They just play the crap out of it. And that's what you want to hear. Now we have, some classic French versions. We have the 3 classic Frenchies. André Guitens, yes, with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra that was at their very best when they made this cycle of Ravel orchestral music. This is on Warner now. It was EMI. What a fantastic cycle it is. Marvelous playing from an orchestra whose sound no longer exists. but it was the sound that Ravel heard. And when you talk about, this authenticity and all that crap, while they're recreating things, picking old creaky instruments and whatever they're doing, it's all nonsense with a pickup orchestra that's been together for 15 minutes. No. You have an orchestra here with a tradition of playing the same instruments with the same people for about 100 and, by the time they made this, they'd been around for about 125 years or so. And boy, did they know the repertoire and love the repertoire, and they were determined to make their statement. And they do. It's a lean sound. It's not powerhouse juggernaut sort of sound that you hear with today's big orchestras where they're just, pulverizingly loud when they want to be. But it gets the job done. It gets the job done through rhythm, through tension, through the corporate sonority, which is unblended, and which, when it's straining at the climaxes, you hear the tension, and that's the point. It's just fabulous, wonderful to listen to, and essential if you want to get a feeling for what an authentic French sound was. Another person who really knew what the authentic French sound was Manuel Rosenthal. He wrote Gaieté Parisienne. Remember him? He recorded it a few times. He lived to be like about 175. He lived to be extremely old. He was friendly with all these people at the turn of the 20th century. Ravel, Debussy, I don't know. He knew everybody. And he made these recordings with the orchestra of the Théâtre National de l'Opéra de Paris. Yay, baby. That's the Paris Opera Orchestra, which you really, really want to hear, just as you want to hear the Paris Conservatory Orchestra. These recordings were made in 1957 and 58. He did all the Ravel stuff, he did all the major Debussy stuff, and he did a few other things besides, which are in this 6-disc commemorative set. Whether you could still find it, I have no idea. It's on Universal Accord, which is a Universal sub-label. But Rosenthal's Ravel and Debussy is the real deal. It really is. He understood this idiom like few others and communicated it effectively to an orchestra that was steeped, like saturated, steeped in the idiom. And so this is amazing if you're looking for a, authentic French type. And the sonics were very good for their period, too. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold, so I'm sorry if I'm sniffly. Martinon, of course. This is like the reference edition for Debussy and Ravel orchestral music. And the performances are, oh my goodness. Martinon was a composer. He was a composer like Ravel was a composer, and he had the same feeling of precision and accuracy that Ravel asked for, but also he had, again, no problem letting all hell break loose when it does. So these are not the best recorded sonically. They're now on Warner. But they are, again, idiomatic and effective and beautifully shaped. with a real arc from the murky beginnings to the final explosive conclusion. You could so easily tell the difference between the conductors who understand the piece and know where it's going and how to get us there, and those that are just there with a really great orchestra that can do anything, and so they just sort of wind it up and let it go. But we're now down to our 3 final conductors and our 3 what I regard as the biggest performances. First, Leonard Bernstein with the Orchestra Nationale de France. This was, oh my God, when this came out, the disc had Bolero, Alvarado del Gracioso, and La Valse. That was all that was on the disc. It had nice, big, thick grooves, which was remarkable for Sony, which made awful pressings for the most part. Sonically, some of the recordings were very good, but the discs were so cheaply made, it was terrible. But the sound on this recording was fantastic. Bernstein did a bunch of recordings with the Orchestra Nationale. He recorded the other stuff for EMI, interestingly enough. Only a couple discs of Berlioz, primarily. He did Harold in Italy and the Symphonie Fantastique and some other goodies. But this Ravel disc was amazing. And the La Valse is everything you'd want from Leonard Bernstein. I mean, it has spontaneity, it has eruptive climaxes, and it has a conclusion that will absolutely bring the house down. Just sensational. First class. So there's that one. Ooh, I have to balance this. We're getting a little crazy here. Then we've got Pierre Boules, the La Valse guy. Now, he did it twice, at least, but twice for major labels. First with the New York Philharmonic, which is in this Boules Ravel orchestral works box, and next with the Berlin Philharmonic for Deutsche Grammophon, much later, a decade or two later, which was one of my greatest recordings ever, and it is. I mean, his whole Ravel cycle in Berlin is astonishing. Now, the New York one, before he did the Berlin one, got a lot of very, very favorable press. I mean, even the Penguin Guide praised it tremendously, which was really kind of cool. It's wonderfully well done, beautifully detailed, and it has some moments because of the sound of the orchestra that Berlin doesn't quite match in the lower strings. I mean, the lower brass particularly. Let's put it that way. However, when he came to do the remake, I mean, he had the Berlin Philharmonic. I said sometimes they had to be forced to do this music. I don't know what happened. They were all on the same page. He has them playing like gods. It is astonishingly beautiful playing, very well recorded by Deutsche Grammophon, and they totally go nuts at the end. Yay! They have percussion, they have brass, they have harps, I mean, really astonishing how fabulously they came to life in these late Boules recordings, because his late stuff wasn't always that interesting. And, but it seems to be that for at least Debussy and Ravel, I mean, it was music that he really, really cared about. Debussy he did in Cleveland, fabulously. Ravel in Berlin. And boy, oh boy, that's a terrific legacy. It really is. I mean, it cements Boules's reputation as a great conductor for sure, and it tells us, for all of his rhetoric about contemporary music and burn down the opera houses and all the other stuff that he did, it tells us where his heart really was, at home in France, even if he lived in Germany. But this La Valse with Berlin is incredible. It's better than the New York one, but the New York one is very, very good. It's wonderful. I mean, it was a reference recording in its day, so you can't complain. However, this time, my recording of La Valse, the one that just, I think, puts it all together, delivers the whole package in a way that I think nothing else quite matches, and the engineering has a lot to do with it, I have to say, is Ozawa and Boston Symphony. This is the most underrated Ravel cycle, and I've talked about it many times because it really is just amazingly well done. It has all of Charles Munch's precision, with even better playing, better sonics, incredible interpretation from Ozawa. He was absolutely 100% on board with this project. He was a master at French music. And like I said, the Boston Symphony was the French orchestra, but best of all, the DG engineers in Symphony Hall really nailed it sonically. You have top to bottom clarity and richness and a bass that will knock you through your back wall without being out of proportion. It's all just there. And so you hear the orchestra at the very end, they are on the verge of losing it. And Ozawa lets them lose it toward the very end. I don't mean lose it in terms of, imprecise playing, inaccurate playing, but there's a certain freedom of rhythm in this performance as we get closer and closer to the apocalyptic conclusion that really you get the sense that the music has completely taken over itself, that it isn't being conducted by somebody, that the orchestra isn't, trying to keep rhythm. It's just happening. There's a naturalness to an inevitability to the conclusion of this performance that's really outstanding, and I don't think anybody else quite matches it. So that's my, however, choice. But there are, as I said, many, many, many fine recordings of La Valse. I mean, these were 13 of them with 12 conductors. Many, many horrible performances, but I think this gives you the classic versions, some more recent versions, and it'll, I think, make you very happy if you're a La Valse-nick, as I am, because, gosh, it's an amazing work. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.